In February 2014, Sports Illustrated published their annual swimsuit edition, compiled of photographs of swimsuit models. This year, alongside these models, was a model not unfamiliar with posing in a bikini. Mattel's own Barbie doll posed in her own full-page spread in the same black and white zebra print swimsuit from the original Barbie in 1959. The original doll also posed for this interesting swimsuit edition. The reaction to this was, as you might expect, somewhat negative. Parents and scholars alike had nothing good to say about Barbie, one of the long-term most popular toys our children have ever been exposed to, having any place in this issue. When I first learned of this latest scandal, my husband and I were in the hospital awaiting the birth of our daughter. As we began discussing it, it occurred to us that Barbie would inevitably play a part in her childhood, just like she had in ours. For me, Barbie was a favorite toy, a doll I played with constantly, imagining all kinds of scenarios for Barbie and her friends to act out. For my husband, Barbie was the toy he was expected to push against in an effort to fully grasp masculinity. Now Barbie has come a long way from the classification of girls' toy only. Of course, there is still a long way to go in this regard. As for our daughter, given the popularity of Barbie, we knew that she would be exposed to the doll and all of her many accessories. But what did this mean for her as she would one day venture into the world and attempt to make sense of it all? Gender scholars and child psychologists will tell you that our daughter will be faced with an impossible standard of beauty which Barbie represents. They'll tell you that our daughter will never feel sufficient as long as a doll with Barbie's unrealistic body proportions exists. But this is an idea I can't get behind. I like to think that my daughter will be fully capable of interacting with the Barbie doll without striving for these impossible standards of beauty. I like to think that my husband and I can raise our daughter to be a strong, independent girl who will know how to differentiate between a doll and actual human beings. Of course, I'm not naive. I know that my daughter will ultimately be exposed to these messages scholars insist the media's presentation of Barbie promote. I don't pretend to know the world my daughter will enter into as an adolescent, and therefore I can't be certain of how she will interpret Barbie. But because of her, I feel compelled to examine Barbie from the media lens. I feel compelled to understand the way Barbie is depicted and the ways my daughter may come to position Barbie into her world. And more importantly, the way my daughter may come to position herself in relation to Barbie. At a closer look, media forms have one overwhelming thing in common. Television shows, movies, magazines, games, they all personify Barbie into a real woman. But it's not just that Barbie's depicted as human. The doll is personified and elevated to celebrity status, appearing on the cover of magazines and as the star of her own television series and movies. It would appear in the media that Barbie has it all, from a dream house all the way to a closet full of every wardrobe change imaginable. The question is, what does this personification mean for young girls? To answer this, we have to look at what the personified doll is doing in media. In all of these, Barbie's personified as fulfilling relationships. She is shown in the relational roles of sister, friend, and girlfriend, but it goes beyond merely showing Barbie in these roles in her media depictions. Through online games, young girls have the ability to interact with Barbie as she performs her relational roles. They can help her plan presents for her younger sisters. They can join her and her friends as they raid Barbie's closet and use Barbie's makeup for their own makeovers. They can even help Barbie as she prepares for a date with her long-term boyfriend Ken. Through these experiences, both viewing and interacting, young girls begin to understand Barbie as a real girl, and they begin to position her into the world around them. To understand fully what this means for young girls as they begin to make sense of the world and their place in it, we must first look to the way young girls construct their own identities. Children are social creatures by nature. They first look to caregivers for this social interaction. But once this need is met, they look to the rest of the world for these experiences. As they begin to make sense of the world around them, children are drawn to their relationships, in particular the relationships between siblings and peers. Children begin identity formation through a game of comparison. With their peers, children position themselves amid others in the attempt to fit in with our society and their peer groups. Children seek to form comparisons through similarities. Meanwhile, the comparison to siblings tends to be one based on differences rather than similar attributes. Children push against the characteristics of their siblings in an effort to establish their own unique place in their family. At any rate, the relationships children form with others is a crucial element which leads to the construction of their own identity and the ways in which they can begin to position themselves amid the rest of the world. When the media presents the image of Barbie as not only human, but as fulfilling these relational roles, it opens the door for young girls to position Barbie in their world in this way. And as children begin to piece together their own identities, they may look to the doll that has been personified in media to begin making the comparisons that cultivate identity formation. So what does this mean for young girls? Scholars and psychologists would argue that this will inevitably prove detrimental for girls. But these opinions stem from the fixation with the two main criticisms that Barbie faces: her unrealistic body proportions and her stereotypical feminine appearance. Scholars argue that these attributes may mean the doll has a negative impact on young girls, who may define the doll as the ideal woman and strive to achieve these same idealized standards. I argue that while this is an important notion to consider, there is another important, perhaps even more important, idea that needs to be examined further. Given the personification of Barbie and her various roles, what can be understood from the absence of these certain relationships? There is no single mom Barbie. There is no transgender Barbie. No adopted Barbie. And without these dolls and the relationships they form, what does this tell young girls? What does the absence of these types of relationships show us? If Barbie is considered the norm, do these other relationships become the deviant groups? What does this underrepresentation mean for young girls as they begin to position themselves into the world using Barbie as their foundation for understanding?